listening to KOWS 107.3 FM in Occidental, California. On the telephone, I think you're in Santa Barbara, California. Paul K. Chappell, good afternoon.
Oh, thanks for having me on your show, Ken. I really appreciate it.
I see. Okay, good. I have to adjust something here, and
Sure.
Now it is adjusted. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great honor to have you because my understanding is that the work you're doing is particularly on target and particularly crucial at this time in our national and global history. And I've heard nothing but good things about you, and we're very privileged to have you on the show. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ken.
All right. Paul K. Chappell is, I'm just a little discombobulated here. Paul K. Chappell is a young man who entered military service and was a captain in the Army. I believe you went into the service in 2002. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you are a true American. Your background is half Korean and a quarter white and a quarter black.
Yes,
so you're well poised to lead us into the rest of the 21st century as a global citizen and a representative of several different cultures, all wrapped up in one currently American package. When I found out about your background, I had to laugh because it's just so. It points forward so beautifully, So anyway, and Mr. Chappell is a young man still. I wrote in my notes. I wrote that you're an old young man, and you're in your early 30s, maybe 31. Is that right?
Right. I'm 31.
Right, and. When Paul was in the Army, well, you know what? I think it's better that you tell us your story. So why don't you just take the ball and let's move upfield?
Well, I think that a lot of my life was affected not just going to West Point and being in the military, but also the way I grew up. I grew up in Alabama, and my father was born in 1925. He grew up in the Great Depression under segregation. And I was able to witness how things had changed in America. I mean, things aren't perfect now, but my father grew up in segregation. He was drafted into a segregated army. My ancestors were slaves. 200 years ago in America, women couldn't vote, women couldn't own property. There were no child labor laws. There were no workers' rights. And we've made progress. And the way we made progress is through nonviolent action, through people practicing democracy and being responsible citizens like Mark Twain, Martin Luther King Jr., Susan B. Anthony, Alice Paul, Frederick Douglass, Henry David Thoreau, Woody Guthrie. And if we've come so far, why can't we keep going in a positive direction? Mm-hmm. And now is a very crucial time where we have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Currently, you are the Peace Leadership Director at the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation. Well, right. That's one of the hats you're wearing now.
Right.
And you've written about your father's military service and how the sort of effect that it had on him and by consequence on the rest of his family, you most prominently.
Right.
And that despite your witnessing your father's suffering, his woundedness as a 30-year serviceman, you chose to go into the military yourself, and you've written quite positively about your experience at West Point.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how I think a lot of people join the military because they want to work for peace, and I can explain that really quickly. If you look at what we're taught in our society from a young age, we're taught that you need war to end war, you need violence to stop violence. So when I was a child, Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, all the comic book heroes, they use violence to make the world better, to protect humanity, to solve problems. In action movies, as a child, the hero would have a gun and kill the bad guy, and then all of a sudden there's peace on Earth. And so I think that I bought into that mythology that, well, to make the world safer, you have to use violence and destructive methods. And at West Point, I was able to learn a large part through what they taught me is that war is actually a very unpredictable, dangerous way to solve problems.
So West Point is not just a big, dumb, gung-ho, let's get out there and kill. It's much more reflective and highly. It represents a great honor of the long tradition of military service to one's country.
Well, in 2006, West Point invited Noam Chomsky to give a lecture to the sophomore class about just war theory and whether the Iraq War was a just war. And it was televised on C-SPAN. And around that same time, West Point also invited Bill Moyers and Al Franken to give lectures there. And things changed since the Vietnam War. After the Vietnam War, the U.S. military realized that American politicians can get the military involved in a war that it can't win. And war needs to be a last resort, and war is a very chaotic situation that has to be taken very seriously.
So war has... What I hear you saying is that our approach to war, our understanding of the deeper implications of war, undergoes a perpetual transformation. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at Sun Tzu, if you go back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War, Sun Tzu believed that war was evil. Sun Tzu believed that the natural state of the world is harmony. And the purpose of war is to bring the world back to harmony as quickly as possible. So Sun Tzu encouraged people to use minimal force in war and to rely more upon deception and trickery and things like that. Rely more on guile and deception. And so I think most peace activists also believe that, well, the natural state of the world is harmony. We should bring the world back to harmony, out of conflict as quickly as possible. And what we've developed in the 20th and 21st centuries is new techniques of waging peace, nonviolent methods that are far more effective than war for solving problems. So if you want to defeat terrorism, if you want to overthrow a dictator, nonviolent methods are far superior than violent methods in the 20th and 21st century. Mm-hmm. And what we're doing right now in terms of waging war is exactly what Osama bin Laden wanted us to do. We fell right into his trap, and a state of endless war, which our country is engaged in now, that will drive us to bankruptcy, is Osama bin Laden's dream come true. So it's a very dangerous strategy we're using now.
Mm-hmm. I have a burning question. I'm going to go right to it. And how has the United States military, the United States government, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, how have these extraordinary institutions allowed themselves to be so corrupted by political considerations, backed up by economic considerations, to find this country that has been so proud and represented such high ideals all over the world for so many generations? How have these massive institutions allowed themselves or allowed ourselves to have fallen so low?
I think there's a few reasons. That's a really good question. I think there's a few reasons. I gave a talk in Bellingham, Washington, and a student from Pakistan told me after my talk, he said, there's something I never understood until I heard your talk. He said, I never understood how, he said, before coming to America, I always saw Americans as the friendliest, nicest, kindest, most generous, hospitable, optimistic people in the world. He goes, Americans are so kind, so optimistic, so generous, but their government does so many horrible things around the world. And he goes, I never understood that contradiction. He said, I never understood how these American people can be so kind, but their government can support dictatorships and do very violent things around the world. And he goes, I finally understand the contradiction. He said, I finally understand how the American public can be so friendly and the American government can be so terrible. And he said, the reason is because most Americans don't know what their government's doing around the world. So I think part of it is the fact that most Americans, even a lot of people in the military, don't really know the real history of American foreign policy. And I mean, the most obvious example is they hate us because we're free, right? They attack us, they hate us because we're free. And what the protests in Egypt and Tunisia and Libya and Syria and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, what those protests have shown is the people in the Middle East want freedom too. And there's huge mass demonstrations across the Middle East where people want their freedom. And many of these governments, the government in Egypt, Tunisia, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, we're actually backing their dictators. And so in that worldview, which is based on limited information, we're the good guys. We promote freedom and democracy. And I've met people in the military who said, I don't understand it. They say, we're in Iraq and Afghanistan to give these people freedom and democracy. Why are these people trying to kill us? I mean, these people are so ungrateful. We're trying to help these people, give them liberty, give them democracy, and all these people want to do is kill us. I don't understand why these people are so ungrateful to us. And so I think that based off incorrect information and a lot of deception from politicians, that has really created a lot of problems. And the world, I mean, America has the most amazing ideals in the world: democracy, freedom, justice, human rights, opportunity. But the world, for the most part, isn't angry at our ideals. The world, for the most part, is angry we don't live up to our ideals, that we preach democracy and we do the opposite. So,
right. Well, tell us about the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, please.
Well, the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation is dedicated to abolishing nuclear weapons and empowering a new generation of peace leaders. And as the Peace Leadership Director, I really focus on, I think that if we're going to wage peace effectively, we have to have the right training. And I think that we have to give people the right skills and tools and understanding to really preach beyond the choir and empower Americans and really solve these problems.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, one of the striking things about your writings is the way you frame peace as a very assertive and energetic undertaking, that it's not a passive, docile stance. You equate waging peace with the same energy and focus and intention as we're used to applying to waging war.
Yeah, waging peace is an action. And if you look at the civil rights movement, or if you look at Gandhi's campaign, or if you look at the women's rights movement, or if you look at Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu and their movement to remove apartheid in South Africa, it's a very energetic, proactive, disciplined campaign. And if we don't see it like that, we're not going to succeed, because we have to be as well trained, as disciplined, as dedicated as soldiers, if not more so. And can I read you a real quick quote? I think it's very timely.
Please.
In terms of why we have to have a new approach. Here's a quote from Osama bin Laden. In 2004, Osama bin Laden released a videotape that was televised in Al Jazeera where he confessed to attacking us on 9/11. And it's a very long transcript, but here's a very interesting quote from the transcript. He said, all that we have to do is to send 2 mujahideen to the farthest point east to raise a piece of cloth on which is written Al-Qaeda in order to make the generals race there to cause America to suffer human, economic, and political losses without their achieving for it anything of note other than some benefits to their private companies. We, alongside the mujahideen, bled Russia for 10 years until it went bankrupt and was forced to withdraw in defeat. So we are continuing this policy and bleeding America to the point of bankruptcy. Al-Qaeda spent $500,000 on the event, September 11th attacks, while America in the incident and its aftermath lost, according to the lowest estimates, more than $500 billion, meaning that every dollar of Al-Qaeda defeated $1 million of America. As for the size of the economic deficit, it has reached record astronomical numbers, estimated to a total more than $1 trillion. And remember, this is back in 2004. And even more dangerous and bitter for America is that the Mujahideen recently forced President Bush to resort to emergency funds to continue the fight in Afghanistan and Iraq, which is evidence of the success of the bleed until bankruptcy plan. So this is back in 2004, where Osama bin Laden, he can't defeat us in a decisive military victory, but he knows that he can bleed us economically to the point of bankruptcy. And look at our economy now in 2011. The unemployment, we had the debt crisis recently, the deficit's out of control. I mean, our economy is collapsing, and he's going to defeat us the same way he defeated the Soviets. So what we're doing now in terms of occupying Middle Eastern countries is exactly what he wanted us to do. We fell right into his trap.
Has he exposed us as stupid?
Yeah, well, he says in this transcript, he says that one thing Sun Tzu teaches one of the worst things you can do in war is become angry. Because if you become angry, you can't think clearly, and you will make a horrible strategic error. And one of the best things you can do in war is make your opponent angry. Because if you make your opponent angry, they can't think clearly, and they will make a horrible strategic error. So part of his plan on attacking us in 9/11 was to make us so angry we can't think clearly, and we will make a horrible strategic error. And there's interviews of him saying that he wants to, interviews from the 1990s where he said he wants to provoke us into attacking and invading the Middle East. And he said in this transcript, it's not so much stupidity. It has more to do with pride and arrogance and greed, which is going to cause us to fall into his trap. And that's why we have to change course, because what we're doing over there, it's going to cause us to suffer enormous hardship, because we can't afford it. We're going to go bankrupt.
The hubris of empire.
Right, the hubris of empire, the hubris of power.
You referred to a speech that President Eisenhower gave a long time ago called the Cross of Iron speech.
Right. Well, I think that in the Cross of Iron speech, Eisenhower, he talks about how he compares the military spending to crucifixion. That's what General Eisenhower compares military spending to. He says it slowly bleeds the country's well-being to death. And the thing is that, I mean, the government learned a lot from the Vietnam War. One of the big things the government learned from the Vietnam War is you need to get rid of the draft, because as long as there's a draft, Americans don't want to go to war anymore. And if the government brought back the draft tomorrow, and they're drafting kids from college to go fight in Afghanistan, we wouldn't be in Afghanistan much longer. And that's why there's no draft. But the economic issue ties the war issue to people's everyday lives, because a lot of people the economy's out of control in terms of how bad it's becoming. And the problem isn't teachers. The problem isn't immigrants. The problem, according to General Eisenhower, is the vast war spending, which bleeds the American not just economy, but all of our other resources just into a point of despair. And we have to overcome that and change course. Otherwise, our country isn't going to be able to overcome these problems.
Do we need to be over there?
Well, I think that, one thing I talk about is I say, well, the purpose of the American military is to protect the American people. And the best way to protect the American people in the 21st century is to help people around the world. So in 2009, the American military performed 154 humanitarian missions in 61 countries. So if there's an earthquake, or if there's a natural disaster, or if there's an epidemic, or if there's famine, you send the American military there, you help people. But the really important thing is the American military has to leave. So you can't have military bases all over the place. And right now, people are suspicious because the American military does do humanitarian aid operations to help with the earthquake in Haiti, to help with the earthquake in Pakistan, but we're also simultaneously killing and bombing people, and we're also putting military bases all over the place. And one of the main reasons Osama bin Laden turned against the U.S., because he was our ally in the 1980s, was because we put military bases in Saudi Arabia where they have Islamic Holy Land. And so I think we could be over in other countries in a humanitarian capacity in terms of a natural disaster happens. You send, the military can deploy tens of thousands of physically fit, mentally tough, well-trained people to any spot in the globe in a matter of days. And that would really help our reputation around the world. And then when the natural disaster is over, we leave. We don't put a big permanent military base there. But in terms of bombing military bases and the method of waging war, I think that's very counterproductive for solving the problem of terrorism. And it's exactly what Osama bin Laden hoped and planned that we would do.
And we're not changing because?
Well, there's a few reasons. I think a big reason is misinformation, where they hate us because we're free. And what I'm offering is a very hopeful message, because if we believe that they hate us because we're free, we're going to be at war forever. But if we realize that, according to General Eisenhower, when he was president, he had what he called the campaign of hatred in the Middle East. And he asked his advisors, why do people in the Middle East hate America? And what they concluded was they hate us not because we're free, but because we block freedom in the Middle East. We block democracy in the Middle East. So if you look at the governments we support there, we supported Saddam Hussein, the dictatorship in Pakistan. We support Saudi Arabian government, Bahrain, Egypt, Tunisia, and when there was a 60 Minutes interview with one of the protesters who led the protests in Egypt, the interviewer asked him, he said, how did you feel when President spoke out? How did you feel when President Obama spoke in behalf of the protesters in Egypt? And this young man who led the protest, he said, look, he goes, we don't need America's help or the help of the Western countries. He said, America has been supporting the regime that has been oppressing us for 30 years. And so one reason there's so much resentment is because we support dictatorships and we suppress freedom in the Middle East, according to Eisenhower. And I don't think that information has reached the American public. And as long as we believe that they hate us because we're free and we're over there to promote democracy and freedom, it's really hard to convince people to change course. But what we have on our side, though, is reality. And I talk to people all the time, and I say, politicians are often stereotyped as being liars, as deceiving people, as being two-faced. And there are certainly honest politicians out there. But why should people be surprised when the American government lies to them? Because who's in charge of the American government? It's politicians. So people have no problem believing that politicians lie, but they have a difficult time imagining that the American government lies to them. But the two are one and the same in terms of who's promoting this information. So,
are we hogtied? Are we held hostage in our own country by private interests, powerful economic interests who have bought our politicians, and we are twisting in the wind here?
Well, it's like General Smedley Butler said. General Smedley Butler was at one time the most decorated Marine in Marine Corps history. He was twice awarded the Medal of Honor. And General Smedley Butler said war is a racket, and he compared himself to a gangster for Wall Street during his long career in the Marine Corps, and this is early 20th century. And I mean, would we be in the Middle East if there wasn't a single drop of oil over there? I think most Americans realize, okay, maybe it's not all about oil, but oil has to be in part of the equation, because if there wasn't any oil in the Middle East, of course we wouldn't be over there. And that, I think, is common sense to many Americans. And I think many Americans think there's a more complicated formula where it's about not just oil, but also promoting freedom, promoting democracy, fighting terrorism. But the primary reason is economic interest. And if you listen to President Obama's speech when he intervened in Libya, he said we can't intervene everywhere, but we will intervene when it serves our national interests. So I think it's a much more open comment about what our real interests are over there.
Well, yeah. Is this our national interest, or has our national interest been kidnapped by private interest? I mean, are we supposed to identify with the interests of, the Fortune 500 companies, or are they? Do they operate? Oh boy, Mr. Chappell, Captain Chappell,
Right.
we still talk about the ideals of this country, and we're bringing freedom and justice and democracy all over the world. And
Right.
I have to bite my lip to even hear this anymore. It's just, I mean, are there any people alive on the face of the earth who still hold to that, or haven't we been disabused of that misdirection long enough now? I mean, are we? It all comes back to us, and it's our perception of what's in not only our national interest, in our self-interest and our national interest, but now we realize very well that we're all in the same boat, and that the interest that we need to get behind is the interest of the planet, of the Earth, and that we are, whether we like it or not, or whether we're not used to it yet, we are all one big miserable family with the potential to be one big happy family.
Right. That's such a great point. And so I think we have to redefine what national interests mean. I think the national interests of the American people are jobs, opportunity, fairness, justice, security, not being spied on by their government. I mean, we're supposed to live in a free society and a democracy. I don't think we should be spied on by our government in all these kinds of illegal ways. I think environmental sustainability is in our national interest as a people. I think that not worrying about being attacked and having an economy not going bankrupt is in our national interest, which is contrary to the interest of people in power. And so the people in power have framed their narrow interest as our collective national interests, which actually work against what the American people need to prosper and survive in this very turbulent era. And I think that, the fatal flaw of every lie is it's not true. In reality, the issue now is people have often asked me, they say, well, how are you going to wake up the American people? How do you plan to wake up the American people? And I say, look, I don't have to wake up the American people. Reality is waking up the American people for me. I mean, if you ask Americans now, how's the economy doing? The economy's in horrible shape. You don't have to wake up the American people. The economy's in bad shape, and America is really in turbulent times. What we have to do is we have to show the American people what's really causing the problem. So the problem isn't teachers. The problem isn't immigrants. The problem is this greed and this war spending and this very narrow approach that misrepresents what our national interests truly are. And so if we can give people the correct information and empower them to make a difference, I think we can solve these problems, because reality is doing a good job of waking people up that there's something not going right in this country. And we have to change something to solve it.
Yeah. You've written that we must create a peaceful revolution in human thinking.
Right.
So you are... You refer to yourself as a peace leader, as a soldier of peace. We talk about waging peace. We don't have the institutions built up yet to come anywhere near the institutions of waging war. So this is a real building project that we have.
Well, it's an underdog struggle, and that's how it's always been. If you look at the civil rights movement had hardly any funding. I mean, civil rights movement was one of the most underfunded, poor campaigns in history, but it was very effective. And the thing is that if you look at, for example, the women's rights movement, when women said that there should be equal rights, the people who opposed women's rights, they controlled the government, they controlled the military, they controlled the society, they controlled the universities, most of the universities, they controlled most of the money. But what did the women have on their side? They had the truth. It wasn't true that women are intellectually inferior to men. It wasn't true that women's equality is unnatural. When Martin Luther King Jr. said that segregation should go away, the people who supported segregation, they controlled the government, they controlled the military, they controlled most of the universities, they controlled the society, they controlled most of the money, they controlled the corporations. But Martin Luther King Jr., he had the truth on his side. It is true that African Americans are equal to white people and that racial harmony is possible. And we're in the same situation today where the people who perpetuate the war system, they control the government, they control the society, they control most of the universities, they control the military, they control most of the money, they control the corporations, but we have the truth on our side where war doesn't make us safe, and the system we have set up now is unsustainable. We're going to leave Afghanistan eventually because we're eventually going to go bankrupt. I mean, our system of perpetual war now is not sustainable over a long term because eventually we're going to go bankrupt. And we have that on our side. And I think that all those victories from the past, if you look at ending apartheid in South Africa, if you look at Gandhi's movement, all human problems come from changing how people think. And you solve human problems, all human problems come from how people think, and solving all human problems comes from changing how people think. So if somebody were to run for president today and say that women shouldn't vote, women shouldn't own property, we should bring back segregation, we should bring back slavery, people would look at him like he's crazy. But that's how everybody used to think 200 years ago. So maybe in 20 or 30 or 50 years, when someone talks about war and torturing people and bombing people, people will look at them the way that they look at people now who talk about bringing back slavery and segregation and oppressing women.
We don't have 20, 30, 50 years.
That's the big difference between now and then, is the world wasn't going to end if African Americans didn't get civil rights. The world wasn't going to end if women didn't get the right to vote. The world wasn't going to end if state-sanctioned slavery wasn't abolished. But the issues we're dealing with now are issues of human survival. And so what we're doing now is really a race against time. The question is, can we do it quickly enough to prevent these major catastrophes that are on the horizon? You're right, we don't have that much time. But I think because of the lack of time, there is a significant amount of urgency in the air where we can really get people involved in solving these problems.
Paul, what's your take on human nature?
Oh, that's what I mostly write about, is human nature. Well, I think that a lot of these problems we're dealing with are built upon a simple myth about human nature. So if you look at the support of slavery, I mean, slavery was around since the beginning of recorded history. Every country had slavery. And in the 18th century, people thought, well, we're going to abolish state-sanctioned slavery. And it was built upon a myth. It was built upon a myth that some people are born to be slaves, and that some races are just born to be slaves, and they're happy being slaves. So a dog is happy being a dog, a cat is happy being a cat, a slave is happy being a slave. And I can't let my slaves go any more than I can let my sheep go, because they wouldn't know how to survive on their own. They need my protection. They need me to be in control of them. And another myth is that, well, women are intellectually inferior to men. You can't let women vote. You can't let women own property. They're going to make a mess of it. You got to protect them from responsibility because they don't have the intellectual ability that men have. Or segregation. African Americans are inferior. So a big myth that's perpetuating the war system is this myth that we're naturally violent. And I could go on for hours about all the evidence that we're not naturally violent. And the idea that we're naturally violent makes war inevitable in our minds, where if we're naturally violent, well, war is just human nature. It makes peace seem naive. It makes peace seem unattainable. And if war is human nature and we're going to have war anyway, why not just be the best at it? And why not preempt it if we have to? Why not? You can't blame anybody for anything if we're naturally violent. You can't blame politicians for going to war because they're just trying to protect us from all the violent people all over the world. You can't blame weapons manufacturers. They're just trying to give us the means to protect ourselves from all the violent people all over the world. But when you realize we're not naturally violent, the whole paradigm changes. And I'd be glad to share some of that evidence.
Will you?
Sure. I think I can give a couple of really quick examples. The first one is the greatest problem of every army in world history, all the military history, the greatest problem of every army in world history is when a battle begins, how do you stop soldiers from running away? If you look at our fight or flight response is far more powerful than our fight response. Most people's natural reaction when you try to stab them with a sword or shoot them with a rifle, most people's natural reaction is to run away as fast as they can, as far as they can. And if you ask anyone who's been in combat, they will tell you it's terrifying. And General Patton said anyone who says they're not afraid in combat is a liar. And so if you look at our fight or flight response, if you're walking down the street and there's a pit bull running toward you, I mean, your instinct is to run away. It's not to fight the pit bull. That's just human nature. We much rather run than get eaten or attacked or suffer injury. And so we have to ask ourselves, how did militaries throughout history learn to make soldiers fight and not retreat? How did they overcome that powerful instinct to flee? And so I'll go back to that pit bull metaphor to explain it. I heard a story on the radio about this 80-year-old woman. And the 80-year-old woman was walking on the street, and there was a pit bull running toward her, a loose pit bull running toward her. So what would you do if there was a loose pit bull running towards you? I mean, your instinct is to run away, right? What if you're right next to a tree? Your instinct is to climb a tree, right? Mm-hmm. Or what if you're right next to a house? You run in the house. Mm-hmm. But this story was about an 80-year-old woman, and she was walking her little poodle, and the pit bull ran up and bit her poodle, and the 80-year-old woman bent down and bit the pit bull on the neck until the pit bull let go. And so think about the dynamics, how they change. If the pit bull is coming toward you, your instinct is to run away. But if the pit bull is attacking your child or your spouse or your friend, you will go berserk. You'll grab a stick or you'll go grab a rock or you'll use your own teeth and you're going to attack the pit bull just on instinct. And so what militaries in history realized, it's what Lao Tzu said, the Chinese philosopher. He said, by being loving, we're capable of being brave. So that's why the Army always has to have this brotherhood, camaraderie, band of brothers, family, and kinship, because if they don't have that band of brotherhood, they're going to retreat off the battlefield. But if they're turned into this band of brothers, then they're going to fight to the death to protect their brother. And that's why every war in human history, political leaders always have to tell the people, we're fighting to protect our family, we're fighting to protect our freedom, we're fighting to protect our loved ones. Every war in history, according to national leaders, is about self-defense or liberating people. There's never been a war in human history where a national leader told its people they're fighting for money or gold or oil. So imagine you're a poor Roman farmer, and the Roman emperor says to you, he says, look, you're a poor Roman farmer. The Roman emperor says, look, I want you to go to war. And the worst case scenario for you is you die, and your wife becomes a widow, and your children become orphans. And the best case scenario for you is you come back to your farm. The Roman farmer is going to say, are you crazy? I'm not going to go to war. But what if the Roman emperor tells you, look, these evil people in this far-off land want to come kill your family. They want to come take away your freedom. They want to come take away your way of life. If you don't fight these people, they're going to come kill you and your family. Then he's going to fight. Another example I can offer really quickly is that war is one of the most traumatizing things a human being can go through. War traumatizes the human brain. People go to war and they go insane. And if we're naturally violent, why would people go to war and suffer so much psychological trauma? If we're naturally violent, people go to war and their mental health would steadily improve over time. The more deployments they have, the more mentally healthy they'd be. And being away from war would actually make us crazy. But the fact that war destroys the human mind over long periods of time, I mean, the human mind is not designed for that kind of environment. And look at now with the soldier suicides and all these different issues, PTSD, that our human mind is not constructed to kill other human beings. And those are just a couple of examples. I mean, I could go on for hours. But those examples are pretty... We all know, even the people who support war will say that war is hell. Even the people who support it say war is hell. But if we're naturally violent, why would war cause so much psychological trauma if we're naturally violent?
And yet, seemingly, governments can still push the right buttons and inspire young men and women to the call of duty and honor and protecting the country and spreading democracy, even with all the evidence to the contrary. Yeah, and there's a couple evolutionary reasons why that works. You have to look at where human beings came from. We came from the African plains. And on the African plains, we were being hunted relentlessly. We were being hunted by lion, hyena. We were being hunted by leopards. If you look at our earliest ancestors, go way, way back, look at our earliest ancestors, and look at human beings. Human beings were not very fast. We are very tall, tempting targets, so we're easy to spot from a long distance because we stand upright, and we're not very fast. So if a pride of lions runs after us, they can easily overtake us quickly. And we can't quickly climb trees. We're physically weaker than chimpanzees and gorillas. We have no natural weapons. We don't have claws. We don't have sharp teeth. We don't have horns. We don't have tusks. We have no natural weapons. So imagine a pride of lions is stalking
a human tribe. And let's say the human tribe has 20 people. You got to keep in mind some of the people are elderly, some of the people are infants, some of them are children. You might have a couple of pregnant women. So there's no way for the human tribe to run away. So what happens to the human tribe? The same thing that happens when that pit bull attacks that woman's dog, or you see someone attack your child, or you see someone threaten your loved one. You go berserk, and you fight. So we had rocks, we had sticks, we'd make noise, and if our loved ones are threatened, we go berserk. And that's an evolutionary adaptation because we can't run away. And you threaten someone's loved one, they go berserk. And so governments have to portray the enemy as these inhuman predators. One thing from this book on killing, written by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, he says, every war in human history has required dehumanization. Every single war in human history has required dehumanization. Every single war. Because we have a natural aversion to killing other human beings, so you have to dehumanize the enemy in order to wage war against them. So the government has to portray the enemy as these inhuman predators who want to come kill our family, take away our way of life. Just like our ancestors on the African plains were threatened by predators who were trying to kill their family. And so it taps into that part of the human psyche that really gets us going and supporting war. And it's all built on illusion. So...
You were deployed to Iraq. What was the experience like for you?
Very eye-opening in many different ways. I write more about it in the third book. But I think that one of the most eye-opening things to me was, which I didn't expect, was the huge contractor presence. Being over there and seeing that there's more contractors there than soldiers. And that was back in 2006, right before the surge, where it was just something that wasn't really being talked about as much back then. A lot of people had never heard of Blackwater back then. And just seeing how the military has become privatized. And the U.S. government learned, people say, well, doesn't the government ever learn anything from war? Didn't it learn anything from Vietnam? How could we have gone to Iraq and Afghanistan? And the government learned a lot from Vietnam. It learned primarily four things. First thing it learned is get rid of the draft, because Americans don't want to go to the war if there's a draft. And there will never again be a major overseas war with long-term combat operations if there's a draft going on and you're taking middle-class kids out of college to go fight. The second thing is you got to embed journalists in military units. The third thing is privatize the military, which is not only very profitable, but it decreases the number of dead soldiers because people don't count against dead contractors. And decreasing the number of dead soldiers reduces public opposition to war. And the fourth thing is telling people that if they don't support the war, they don't support the troops. That was all orchestrated. And I think that the fact that it's no longer true that war will end if soldiers refuse to fight. There's people who want the military to become entirely privatized. I mean, Blackwater loves it when peace activists focus all their efforts on counter-recruiting because they want the military to become privatized and it to become corporate in nature. So we have to solve war from the underlying root, which is a much different issue.
You write that we should never underestimate the power of human forgiveness.
Right. Yeah, human forgiveness is powerful over generations, where if we've caused problems, we can move beyond those problems. I mean, my ancestors in America were slaves, and African Americans today aren't trying to kill white people in revenge for several hundred years of slavery. I mean, we're talking hundreds of years of slavery. Mm-hmm. And after slavery ended, segregation. And you don't see black people trying to kill white people in revenge for hundreds of years of slavery. You don't see Native Americans trying to kill white people in revenge for over 10 million Native Americans being killed in North America by many estimates. And you don't see the Israelis trying to kill the Germans now. You don't see the Israelis attacking the Germans. You don't see the Russians attacking the Germans. We've got to keep in mind Hitler killed millions of Jews. He killed millions of Russians. You don't see them attacking the Germans because over time, especially as new generations emerge, the past can be put behind us. And one reason I have a lot of hope that peace is possible is we have to look at why the Europeans were able to conquer the entire world. I mean, one reason the Europeans were able to conquer the entire world is for 500 years, Europe was the bloodiest place on earth. The Europeans waged warfare for 500 years, and when you do something for 500 years, you get really good at it. So when the Europeans went to other continents couldn't compete with the Europeans militarily. And a lot of that was religious war between Protestants and Catholics. And look at Europe today. Could you imagine a war in Western Europe? Could you imagine France going to war with Germany now? Could you imagine Germany going to war with England now? And Europe was the bloodiest place on earth for 500 years. If Europe could become peaceful, any place on earth can become peaceful, because there's never been a higher concentration, duration of war than Europe. But of course, a lot of things have to happen to make that a reality. But it's just one positive sign that change is possible.
Yeah, you say you're not sure if America will be saved, but you know that it can be saved.
Yeah, I'm skeptical. There's a such thing as naive hope. Naive hope is where things are magically going to work out. God's going to solve all of our problems. A miracle is going to happen. But realistic hope is the fact that we can solve these problems. We have the tools, we have the ability, we have the knowledge, we have the understanding. Doesn't mean we're going to be able to win or succeed, but we can. And America's fate depends upon what we do. And people often ask me, they say, well, how long will it take to end war? How long will it take to end war? I say, well, I can answer that question by asking another question. How long does it take to run a mile? You can run a mile in under 4 minutes. You can run a mile in 15 minutes. You can walk around and walk a mile in an hour. You can start running a mile and quit halfway through. You can never take the first step. It depends upon what you do. So we might end war in 10 years. We might end it in 30 years. We might never end it. It depends upon what we do, the strength and quality and quantity of our actions. So I'm very optimistic, but I'm also skeptical, and I think if we're naive about these problems and what we're facing, we're not going to be able to overcome them.
Mm-hmm. My library couldn't turn up your books. How do we get a hold of your books?
Oh, I can ask my publisher and get back to you. So,
I mean, we want our listeners to know how they can access your books. I've heard good things about them. I'd love to see them.
I have a website, www.willwareverend.com. Again, that's www.willwareverend.com, willwareverend.com, and that's where they can get a lot more information, not just about the books, but about these really crucial issues. And it's a really challenging time to be alive, but I think that, I don't know, there's just every reason I have to despair, I have 10 reasons to be hopeful.
Right.
So.
Right. Are you finding sufficient collaboration for this work?
I think momentum is building. I don't think we're anywhere near where we have to be in terms of momentum yet. But I think over the next few years, this is a long-term struggle, and I think that over the next 5 years, I think things are going to become worse before they become better. And I think that the momentum over the next 5 years is what's really going to be vital. But I think right now, if you look at the peace movement, I don't think it's anywhere near where it needs to be in terms of, we have to have a message that can resonate with the American people. We can't just preach to the choir. We can't just talk to our own demographic. There's no reason why the majority of people who identify with the Tea Party, the majority of people who consider themselves conservatives, couldn't be a part of this movement, because this movement is about saving the American economy, saving American ideals, ensuring American security. And if you look at General Eisenhower, he was a Republican president, and traditional conservative values are about fiscal responsibility, not waging wars overseas and those kinds of issues. And I think that these are nonpartisan issues. If I were to give a talk with 50 Americans and I were to say, okay, raise your hand if you want terrorism to increase. I mean, who's going to raise their hand? Whether they're liberal, conservative, Tea Party, peace activists, no one's going to raise their hand. And if I ask, raise your hand if you want the American economy to collapse. Raise your hand if you want our country to be less safe. Raise your hand if you want innocent people to die. Raise your hand if you want unnecessarily high taxes. Raise your hand if you want America to fall apart. I mean, no one's going to raise their hand, and we have to give people the right information and engage people. It's like Noam Chomsky. He says a lot of the issues that activists are dealing with today, they just don't relate to the problems most Americans are experiencing. A lot of Americans, their major problems are unemployment, economic hardship, and just despair and uncertainty. And we have to meet people on those grounds. And if we tie war to the economy and show people that Osama bin Laden's plan is to bankrupt us, and if we show people that General Eisenhower compared military spending to crucifixion, economic and societal crucifixion, that can really get people thinking differently. And the problem it's not public school teachers. It goes much deeper than that. So
yeah, you say the greatest threat to our country is actually from within.
Yeah, the greatest threat to our country is within. The worst thing we can do that'll destroy America is abandon American ideals, because our best protection in the 21st century is American ideals. And when our country is torturing people and spying on its own people and betraying American values and supporting dictatorships, we cease to be a beacon that can provide hope around the world. And I mean, America's had this problem before. We got to keep in mind, the great tragedy of the Romans was brutality. The great tragedy of America is hypocrisy. We've had this problem before. Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal, but Frederick Douglass said, wait a minute, I mean, we're a slave-holding country. But Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., all these different people, the women's rights movement, they were able to put the ideals of the Declaration of Independence into reality. So I see the Declaration of Independence as an idea, as a document far ahead of its time. And our job, America is a democratic experiment. The Declaration of Independence was far ahead of its time, perhaps far ahead of our time. But we have to take the actions as citizens to make the Declaration of Independence a reality. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness for all people. It's like Thomas Paine said. Thomas Paine said, my country is the world. And he's one of our founding fathers. That kind of idealism is what we have to assert in this very turbulent era. And that'll make our country not only safer, but healthier economically, and the kind of America that we all hope our country can be.
And how can we get involved?
My website, worldwareverend.com. There's also a link there to wagingpeace.org. So the organization I work for, the Nuclear AIDS Peace Foundation, we have many ways to get involved. We have ways people can get involved in their community. We have a newsletter to provide information. And I think that right now, at this point in time, the most crucial way to get involved is we have to train ourselves, evolve our understanding. And I just see too much dehumanization. I see people in America dehumanizing people in the Middle East. I see peace activists dehumanizing Tea Party people and conservatives. Oh, they're a bunch of morons. They're a bunch of idiots. But we have to move beyond that. We have to, if you look at Martin Luther King Jr., he was able to engage people who disagreed with him and convince a number of those people to his cause. And if you look at Nelson Mandela, if you look at Susan B. Anthony, if you look at Frederick Douglass, if you look at Gandhi, they didn't use those tactics. They were able to, if you look at most conservatives in America, most people who identify with the Tea Party, they are angry at the economy. They're angry at the bank bailout. I mean, Tea Party people, they're angry about the bank bailout. Most peace people angry about the bank bailout, angry at Wall Street. And why can't we unite those people across some common issues? They're not going to agree upon everything, but get them to agree at least upon a couple of vital issues in the 21st century. So if we can't make peace with our own country, how can we possibly make peace with other countries? I mean, if we can't make peace between Americans, how do we have any hope of making peace between America and other countries if we can't even make peace with ourselves?
Boy, you're nailing it there.
Yeah, and there's people in power who have a vested interest in dividing us. I mean, divide and conquer. There's people in power, they want the peace movement to see Tea Party as the enemy. They want peace activists to see conservatives as the enemy. They want conservatives to see liberals as the enemy. They want liberals to see conservatives as the enemy. They want working class people to see teachers as the enemy and immigrants as the enemy. And that's how they keep us in line, as they divide us. But we have to refute that And if we can't make peace amongst ourselves and see our shared humanity and our shared American values, how can we possibly make peace around the world? And that's what's really that's what they're most afraid of. The people in power are most afraid of Americans seeing how much they really have in common. They're most afraid of the working class person seeing how much they have in common with the teacher and the immigrant. They're most afraid of people in the peace movement seeing how much they have in common with people in the military. They're most afraid of liberals seeing how much they have in common with conservatives and vice versa. And that's how we're going to win, is by uniting along those lines.
Rob Shetterly was on just before you. He sends his love, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I'm really grateful to know him. Yeah,
what a beautiful man, and what beautiful work he does. And he recently did your portrait. And he chose a quote for your portrait that he read an hour ago. And if, with your permission, I'd like to read it again here.
Yes, that'd be...
This is Paul Chappell speaking. When people in a democracy are not educated in the art of living to strengthen their conscience, compassion, and ability to question and think critically, they can be easily manipulated by fear and propaganda. A democracy is only as wise as its citizens, and a democracy of ignorant citizens can be as dangerous as a dictatorship. And that's the razor's edge that we're walking on right now, isn't it?
Yes, it's the greatest threat to American democracy is American democracy, and the greatest threat to America is America. We have to save ourselves from ourselves. And the fatal flaw of democracy is that people aren't educated, if people aren't aware of what's going on, democracy becomes very dangerous. And people in power have a vested interest in keeping the public misinformed, keeping the public divided, keeping the public ignorant. And that's what we have to do to overcome what they're doing, is because once people are informed and empowered and educated and united, then nobody in power can suppress American democracy. So this is really a fight for This is really a fight for the survival of American ideals and a fight for the survival of American democracy. This is what this is really about.
Well, it's a fight for our lives.
Yes, and our fight for our own survival as a country and as a planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're most eloquent, and I'm deeply grateful for you to come and speak with us. And I look forward to hearing more from you. I could. It's just wonderful that you've taken up this work, and that you're as articulate and feelingful as you are, because that's one of the great communications is we need to actually feel the emotion and the deep rooted sanity in all this communication, and let it move us.
Right, and I'm really grateful to be on your show, and I think that your show, it's another sign of hope, because all over the country, their truth is bubbling, and people are becoming more aware, and people are becoming more concerned, and we live in a country where we can talk about these issues. I mean, 400 or 500 years ago, you couldn't say the Earth goes around the sun without being executed. Mm-hmm. And now we can talk about these serious issues because we do have that freedom as an American citizen, and we have to maintain that. And I think your show is just another sign of hope that things are changing and things can change. So I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for everything you're doing as well.
Well, you're more than welcome. Please come back again down the road. We need to hear all these wonderful voices, yours among them. So thanks again.
Oh, thank you very much, Ken.
Okay.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
This is Paul K. Chappell, Chappell, a soldier of peace, a peace leader, and quite articulate, a young man, 31 years old, an Army captain, trained at West Point, deployed in Iraq, author of coming up on 3 books now. You can find him. And that's it. On we go. Thank you, Captain Chappell, Paul Chappell. we were scheduled to have Jeremy Miller on the third hour today. We had to postpone that. You're listening to KOWS 107.3 FM, Occidental, California. It's the What Now Show, Mondays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., the website pantedmonkey.org. We're starting our third season on the air. We've done over 250 of these interviews. They're all archived. Most of them are archived at pantedmonkey.org. And I'll be back in a few minutes to make an attempt to kind of bring our listeners up to date on the status and the vision of this radio show. So those of you who listen live, if you want to stay tuned for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we'll be back next week. Next week, we're doing a special show. We're doing 4 hours. We're going to start at 10 a.m. rather than 11 on Pacific time. And we're going to go 4 hours next week.